Billionaire CEO wants to fire black woman, freezes when she sees. Two little girls inside the blaring buzz of the ancient alarm clock shattered the fragile stillness of the room. Amara Lewis groaned softly, burying her face into the thin, pilled pillow as dawn barely grayed the cracked ceiling above her. She turned, blinking at the cramped apartment where her 6-year-old twin daughters, Nia and Noelle, still slept soundly, bundled together under a fraying blanket. For a brief moment, she let herself just watch them, the slow rise and fall of their tiny chests, the way their curls tumbled wildly across the pillows. Another day, Amara murmured to herself, swinging her legs over the edge of the mattress onto the frigid floor. The chill bit into her skin immediately. They had not had reliable heat for 2 months now. Rent was 3 months overdue. She could practically hear the ticking countdown in her mind, getting louder every second. Moving quietly so as not to wake the girls, Amara slipped into a faded sweatshirt and shuffled to the kitchenette. The cabinets, once a bright white, were yellowed with age, their doors hanging crookedly on rusted hinges. She opened the pantry and found what she already knew: half a loaf of bread, a near-empty jar of peanut butter, and 2 slightly bruised apples. Breakfast of champions, she thought wryly, forcing herself to smile. The coffee maker coughed and sputtered, struggling with the last scoops of ground coffee Amara had managed to scrape together. She leaned her elbows on the counter, rubbing her temples. She had to make it to Friday, one more paycheck, one more slim chance to juggle the bills long enough to stay afloat. 2 years ago, life had been different. Malik had still been alive, their dreams still intact. A drunk driver had shattered everything in an instant. No life insurance, no savings, just a young widow with 2 toddlers and an avalanche of hospital debts that no one cared about but her. The soft shuffle of small feet on linoleum pulled Amara from the spiral of thoughts. "Morning, Mommy," whispered Nia, her voice still heavy with sleep. She climbed onto a rickety kitchen chair, clutching her battered teddy bear. "Good morning, baby," Amara said, planting a kiss on her daughter's forehead. Noelle appeared next, rubbing her eyes and dragging her favorite pink blanket behind her like a cape. Amara's heart squeezed tight seeing them, so bright, so full of life despite everything. "Can we have pancakes, Mommy?" Noelle asked hopefully. Amara's throat tightened. Pancakes meant eggs and milk, both of which were painfully absent. She crouched to their level, smoothing back Noelle's wild curls. "How about peanut butter toast today?" "And this weekend, maybe we can make a big pancake breakfast together," she promised. It was a lie. She hated lying to them, even small ones. But lies were sometimes the only way to keep hope alive. The twins nodded and chattered to each other as Amara prepared breakfast. She cut the toast into triangles, just the way they liked, and poured the last of the milk into 2 mismatched cups. As they ate, Amara pulled out her phone, scrolling through the overnight emails. Rejection. Another rejection. "No callbacks for interviews, no new leads." She shoved the phone face down on the table. She could not afford to lose her current temp job at Sterling Holdings. Even though the pay was barely enough to scrape by, it was the only thing standing between them and disaster. Just as she was gathering plates, a sharp knock rattled the apartment door. Amara stiffened immediately. Nothing good came from unexpected knocks in this neighborhood. "Stay here," she told the girls firmly, setting down the dishes. She peeked through the peephole. A man in a cheap gray suit stood there, holding a thick envelope. Dread prickled down her spine. "Amara Lewis?" he asked when she cracked open the door. "Yes." He thrust the envelope toward her. "This is your final delinquency notice. You have 30 days to vacate." The words blurred before her eyes. 30 days. No negotiation. "No second chances. There must be some mistake," she whispered. I have a payment plan." "I sent part of it last week. Ma'am, Sterling Properties has already filed. You'll need to discuss that with them directly. Sterling Properties. The name tasted like acid in her mouth. Thank you, she said mechanically, shutting the door before the man could see the panic welling up inside her. Mommy? Nia's small voice carried from the kitchen. It's okay, baby, Amara called back, forcing steadiness into her voice. Mommy's just dealing with boring grown-up stuff. She leaned her forehead against the door, the coolness of the wood doing nothing to stop the tremor in her hands. 30 days. And she had $60 in the bank. Somehow she pulled herself together, smiling tightly as she rejoined her daughters. They deserved to feel safe. She would move mountains if she had to. Somehow. Across the glittering skyline of downtown Chicago, in a penthouse office that overlooked the world, Vivian Sterling reviewed a sleek tablet displaying names, salaries, and red marks against employees deemed non-essential. Cut 10%, she told her assistant coldly. Rebecca hesitated. There's a single mother on the list. 2 kids. No other income. Vivian waved her off with a manicured hand. Everyone has choices. Sterling Holdings is not a charity. Her assistant bit her tongue, used to Vivian's ruthlessness by now. Vivian Sterling had built her empire by erasing sentimentality. Emotions clouded judgment. She had no room for weakness, either in herself or those who worked for her. Get me the details on that case, Vivian said, tapping the tablet. I want to handle this one personally. Rebecca blinked. Ma'am. If people want to freeload, they can expect to be evicted in person. Vivian's smile was razor-thin as she turned back to the sweeping view of the city she ruled. Amara Lewis would soon learn that the world took no prisoners. Not in Vivian Sterling's world, and certainly not on her watch. The wind whipped through the crumbling courtyard of Westbridge Apartments as Vivian Sterling stepped from her sleek black town car. She wrinkled her nose in distaste at the graffiti-tagged walls and trash-strewn sidewalks. She had reviewed the file twice on the drive over. Amara Lewis. Single mother, 2 dependents, no substantial assets. 3 months overdue on rent. No different from the hundreds of other eviction cases Sterling Properties processed every year. Still, Vivian had insisted on seeing this one for herself. She wanted to remind herself why standards were necessary. Emotions made people weak. Charity made them entitled. And she was not running a charity. She adjusted the sharp cut of her tailored coat and strode toward the peeling front door of Building C, high heels clicking with purposeful finality. Rebecca had texted her the unit number. 3rd floor, left side. The stairwell reeked of mildew and old smoke. Vivian pressed a handkerchief to her nose and climbed, each step a grim confirmation of how far some people let themselves fall. When she reached apartment 3B, she hesitated for the briefest second before knocking. She expected anger, tears, excuses. She was not prepared for the sound of little feet racing across the floor. The door opened, and there stood Amara Lewis. Vivian's first impression was clinical, young, early 30s. Thin, but not sickly. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back into a loose bun. No makeup. No jewelry. Every detail screamed of struggle. Behind Amara, 2 small girls peered around her legs. Twins, identical save for the color of their shirts. One clutched a battered teddy bear. The other held a crumpled piece of construction paper. Good afternoon, Vivian said crisply, her voice cutting through the thick, stale air. Are you Amara Lewis? Yes, Amara replied cautiously, stepping slightly forward to shield her daughters. Vivian held up the eviction file like a weapon. I represent Sterling Properties. You've been notified several times. This is your final notice. Amara's jaw tightened. Her eyes, warm brown and ringed with exhaustion, hardened. "I know," she said. "I was just about to call. It would not matter now." Vivian opened her mouth to deliver the rehearsed line about consequences and deadlines. Then the little girl stepped forward, the one with the teddy bear. Without hesitation, she lifted the paper in her small hand toward Vivian. "I made you a picture," she said solemnly. Vivian stared, frozen, as she took the paper mechanically. It was a child's drawing, crayon stick figures, a woman with silver hair in a big building. Two little girls holding balloons, a smiling sun. "Thank you," the girl said shyly. "Mommy says being kind is important even when people are mean." Vivian swallowed hard. She could not seem to find her voice. This was not part of the script. "Nia," Amara said gently, "come back here." But Nia only smiled, completely oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Do you want to come inside?" Noelle asked brightly. "We have cookies." "Well, one cookie, we can share." Vivian's hand, the one holding the eviction file, trembled slightly. She was not supposed to care. She had built walls precisely so moments like this would never penetrate. But standing there, looking down at two innocent faces so full of trust and hope despite their obvious hardship, Vivian felt something shift inside her. Something old and unwelcome. A memory. A different apartment. A different door. A sister's hand slipping from hers. Screams. Cold hands pulling them apart. She slammed the door on the memory. "No, thank you," she said stiffly, stepping back. The girls' faces fell. Amara's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I apologize," she said quickly, pulling her daughters gently away. "They're just trying to be polite. We weren't expecting company." Vivian tucked the picture into the eviction file without looking at it again. "I need to speak with you alone," she said. Amara nodded, ushering the twins toward a back room. "Girls, go finish your coloring, okay?" "Mommy will be right there." Once they were gone, Amara crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "You've made yourself clear," she said. 30 days. I get it." Vivian stared at her. At the peeling paint behind her, at the single battered couch, the empty bookshelves. The patches where pictures had once hung. This was not laziness. This was survival. Something clawed at Vivian's chest, raw and unexpected. "What happened to your husband?" she asked before she could stop herself. Amara blinked, surprised. "Killed by a drunk driver. 2 years ago." Vivian inhaled sharply. "I am sorry," she said quietly. And to her own astonishment, she meant it. Amara shrugged, the movement brittle. "Sorry doesn't pay rent." "No, it does not." Vivian's mind raced. She could leave. Close the file. Let the eviction proceed. It was business. Clean. Efficient. Or she could do something she had not done in decades. Act on instinct, not numbers. The twins' faces flashed in her mind. "I will delay the eviction," she said abruptly. Amara stared at her, clearly not believing. For how long? 30 days. Reassessment pending employment status. Employment status. Vivian tapped the file. "There's a clerical position opening at the Sterling Foundation. Low level." "Paperwork. If you apply and if you qualify, it could stabilize your situation." Amara's mouth opened, then closed. "Why would you—" Vivian's voice hardened. "Do not mistake this for charity. It is an opportunity. Take it or leave it." Amara studied her for a long moment. "What if I take it, and you still evict us anyway?" Vivian smiled thinly. Then you will at least know you tried. It was a cruel thing to say. She knew it the moment the words left her lips, but Amara did not flinch. Then I guess I will be seeing you again, she said coolly. Vivian turned, heels echoing sharply down the concrete hallway. In the parking lot, she climbed into the town car and finally unfolded the crumpled drawing. The woman in the picture had silver hair. She was smiling. For the first time in years, Vivian Sterling realized that maybe some battles were not won by crushing your enemies. Maybe some battles were won by being seen. Maybe some were won by a 6-year-old girl with a crayon. Vivian folded the picture carefully and slipped it into her leather portfolio. Then she gave the order. Put a hold on Unit 3B. No further action without my authorization. Yes, ma'am, Rebecca said over the speakerphone, confused but not foolish enough to question her. Vivian stared out at the gray skyline. This was not the story she had intended to write today. But maybe, just maybe, it was the one she needed to. The hallway of Sterling Foundation's downtown office buzzed with energy as Amara Lewis stepped tentatively off the elevator. She clutched the manila envelope containing her resume and the last shreds of her pride. The air smelled of expensive cologne and freshly brewed coffee, a sharp contrast to the stale scent of her apartment building. Everything gleamed, glass walls, polished marble floors. She felt the eyes of passing employees skim over her, quick assessments flashing across their faces. They saw her clothes, the ones she had ironed 3 times this morning, but could not disguise their age. They saw her skin, her nervousness, and just like that, she was categorized. She drew a slow breath and straightened her shoulders. She had made it through worse. She could survive this. Amara approached the reception desk, where a woman with a headset smiled mechanically. Name? Amara Lewis. I have an interview. The woman scanned a list and nodded. 3rd floor. Human Resources. Room 3C. Thank you, Amara replied, though the woman had already looked away. The elevator ride up was short, but her heart hammered hard enough that she could hear it in her ears. At the 3rd floor, a young man in a charcoal suit ushered her down a hallway lined with inspirational corporate posters. Words like excellence and innovation shouted at her in giant, bold letters. Inside room 3C sat a panel of 3 people. 2 women and a man, each with a laptop open and matching polite smiles. Vivian Sterling was not among them. Amara had not expected her to be. Vivian did not dirty her hands with entry-level interviews. Please have a seat, one of the women said, gesturing to a chair positioned uncomfortably in the center of the room like a spotlight. Amara sat, crossing her ankles and folding her hands tightly in her lap. Tell us a little about yourself, the man prompted. Amara gave the standard speech. Single mother. Bachelor's degree in communications. Worked administrative and reception roles, strong organizational skills. Reliable, dedicated. The woman with sharp bangs peered over her laptop. Your resume shows gaps in employment. Care to explain? Amara swallowed. My husband passed away 2 years ago. I focused on caring for my daughters and returning to work as soon as possible. Sympathy flickered across the woman's face, but the man remained impassive. We appreciate honesty. However, we require employees who can handle fast-paced environments without personal issues interfering. I can, Amara said evenly. My situation is stable. I am fully committed to succeeding here. The second woman scribbled a note. What would you say is your greatest weakness? Amara hated this question. Everyone did. She forced a tight smile. I care too much about doing things right. I have trouble stopping it good enough. The woman nodded as if ticking off a box. After a few more perfunctory questions, they dismissed her with cool handshakes. "We will be in touch," the man said. Amara forced another thank you from her lips and walked out, feeling the heat of their judgment trail after her. By the time she reached the lobby, she wanted to cry. Not because she had bombed the interview, she hadn't, but because she had recognized the underlying tone. Pity, doubt, the same things she faced every day. Outside, she leaned against a concrete pillar, taking deep breaths of the cold Chicago air. She was about to pull out her phone to call Mrs. Janine, her neighbor who was watching Nia and Noel, when she heard a voice. "Ms. Lewis," Amara turned. Vivian Sterling herself approached, impeccably dressed in a navy coat, a silk scarf knotted at her throat. She walked like a woman who expected the world to part for her. "I understand you completed your interview," Vivian said. "I did," Amara replied cautiously. "And how do you think it went?" Amara bit back the automatic politeness. "I think I am qualified, but I also think it might not matter." Vivian's brows arched slightly. "Explain." Amara hesitated. There was a sharpness in Vivian's gaze, an edge honed from years of power. It was dangerous to show weakness in front of her. "But maybe, just maybe, honesty was a different kind of strength." "You made this offer because you saw my daughters," Amara said. "Not because you thought I was the best candidate on paper." Vivian said nothing, her face unreadable. "And I appreciate it. I do. But pity does not build careers, and I am not here for handouts. I am here because I am damn good at what I do." The sharp breeze cut between them as Vivian studied her. Finally, a small smile touched Vivian's lips. Noted. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Amara standing there, stunned. It was only later that night, after putting the twins to bed, after scrubbing the kitchen counters to occupy her racing mind, that Amara's phone buzzed. She picked it up, her heart hammering. An email. Subject, employment offer, Sterling Foundation. Dear Ms. Lewis, we are pleased to offer you the position of Administrative Coordinator at Sterling Foundation, effective immediately. Further details are attached. Welcome to the team. Best regards. Vivian Sterling. Amara stared at the screen, disbelieving. She had done it, not because of a handout. Because she had looked one of the most powerful women in Chicago dead in the eye and dared her to see more than a charity case. She pressed her hand over her mouth, tears prickling her eyes. "Mommy," a sleepy voice called from the bedroom. "Coming, baby," she whispered. She tucked her phone into her pocket and walked back toward her daughters, her steps lighter than they had been in months. For the first time in a long time, the future did not look like a threat. It looked like a promise. The first day at Sterling Foundation arrived cold and crisp, the early spring air biting against Amara's thin coat as she hurried from the bus stop. She checked her reflection in the dark glass of the building's entrance, adjusting the simple gray blazer she had borrowed from Mrs. Janine. It was a little too big at the shoulders, but it would have to do. Inside, the lobby buzzed with energy. Men and women in sharp suits moved briskly through the security gates, tablets and phones in hand, clipped conversations echoing in the marble space. Amara's stomach twisted, but she forced herself forward, clutching her employment papers like a shield. At the reception desk, a young woman glanced up with a bland smile. Name, Amara Lewis. First day. The woman tapped her keyboard, then handed Amara a visitor's badge and gestured toward the elevators. Third floor, Human Resources will get you set up. The ride-up felt endless. Amara stared at the floor numbers lighting up, each ding hammering into her nerves. When the doors opened, a woman in a burgundy skirt suit waited, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Lewis, welcome. I'm Dana, HR Orientation. Come with me. Dana led her through a labyrinth of glass-walled offices and pristine workstations, her heels clicking with rhythmic efficiency. You'll be assisting multiple departments, mostly administrative support, calendar management, filing, and event coordination. Pace is quick here. Adaptability is critical. Understand? Amara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Dana stopped at a modest cubicle tucked near the back of the floor. A computer, a headset, and a stack of onboarding manuals waited for her. Get settled. Someone will check in after lunch. Orientation packets in your inbox. And with that, Dana disappeared, leaving Amara staring at the reality of her new life. She slid into the chair and logged into the computer, the screen glaring white in the overhead lights. A sea of unread emails flooded the inbox, subject lines filled with unfamiliar acronyms and urgent requests. She exhaled slowly, one thing at a time. By noon, she had already made 3 mistakes, sending a draft instead of a finalized document, misrouting an internal call, and mistyping a meeting time on a conference room reservation. Tiny missteps, but they built up, each one a fresh cut to her already raw nerves. At lunch, she found a quiet corner in the break room, nibbling at a sandwich she had packed from home. The room buzzed with conversation, but no one sat near her. She knew why. She was the outsider, a black woman in a sea of polished, mostly white faces, her thrift store shoes squeaking against floors polished to a corporate shine. She finished quickly and returned to her desk, focusing hard on the training modules blinking on her screen. She would not give them a reason to doubt her. Late in the afternoon, a shadow fell across her cubicle. Ms. Lewis, Amara turned. Vivian Sterling stood there, arms folded, her expression as unreadable as ever. Come with me. Without waiting for a response, Vivian turned on her heel and strode down the hallway. Amara scrambled to follow, heart thudding. Vivian led her to a small conference room. Closing the door, she motioned for Amara to sit. Amara obeyed, her mouth dry. Vivian sat across from her, folding her hands on the table. You made several errors this morning. Amara's throat tightened. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Vivian studied her, her gaze sharp enough to peel paint from the walls. No, it will not. Because you will learn. Quickly! Amara nodded, shame burning in her chest. I didn't bring you here out of pity, Vivian continued. Understand that. You are here because I believe you can be an asset, but that belief is not infinite. You will need to prove yourself every day, double what others must. The words hit hard, but Amara welcomed their brutal honesty. I understand. Vivian leaned back slightly, regarding her. Do you... Amara met her gaze squarely. I know exactly what this is. I know the margin for error is razor thin. I know every mistake will be magnified because of who I am and where I come from. Vivian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Good. Because I do not tolerate weakness. Not in myself. Not in those I give opportunities to. There was a long pause. Finally, Vivian slid a folder across the table. Your next assignment. Coordinate the logistics for the upcoming Community Outreach Gala. Budget approvals, venue reservations, catering, guest management. Everything. Amara blinked. That was a huge project, one that could make or break her. I'll get it done, she said, forcing confidence into her voice. Vivian nodded once. You'll report directly to me for this. Then she stood and walked to the door, pausing just before she exited. Ms. Lewis. Yes, do not mistake my expectations for cruelty. Vivian's voice softened by a fraction. There are people here who will want you to fail, not because you are unqualified, but because you remind them they are not invincible. Prove them wrong. With that, she was gone, the door clicking softly behind her. Amara sat motionless for a long moment, the folder heavy in her hands. She opened it slowly, scanning the contents. Timelines, budgets, contact lists. It was a mountain, but she had climbed mountains before. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, the office buzzed on, indifferent to her existence. Amara squared her shoulders, stood, and walked back to her desk. She would not just survive this. She would own it. For herself, for Nia and Noelle. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and doubt, a spark caught fire. It would not be extinguished. Amara barely slept that night. After putting the twins to bed, she stayed up for hours hunched over the gala logistics packet, scribbling notes, sketching timelines, running numbers. Every time she thought about what was at stake, her hands shook slightly. Not just a job. Not just pride, stability, a future for Nia and Noelle. She couldn't afford a single misstep. By morning, Amara had compiled a working plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was a foundation. She printed it out and tucked it neatly into a binder before heading to the office, her mind sharp despite the lack of sleep. The Sterling Foundation's lobby gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. As Amara passed through security, she caught sight of herself in the mirrored elevator doors. Exhausted, yes, but also resolute. She was not the woman who had stood here trembling days ago. She had no time for fear anymore. The day unfolded in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Dana from HR had scheduled a session to brief her on procurement processes, while the events manager sent a terse email about venue insurance regulations. Every step revealed a new layer of complexity she hadn't anticipated. Mid-afternoon, Vivian summoned her. "You have 15 minutes, Vivian said crisply, not looking up from her laptop as Amara entered her office. Amara laid the binder on her desk. Progress report. Amara launched into it, detailing tentative venue options, preliminary cost estimates, and vendor availability for catering and decor. She outlined her plan with clarity and precision, ticking off points methodically. Vivian glanced up once, her expression impassive. "You're ahead of schedule." Amara fought to keep her face neutral. "Thank you." Vivian closed the binder with a soft thud. "Don't thank me yet. Execution is everything. Plans mean nothing without flawless follow-through." Amara nodded, understanding the warning beneath the words. One slip, one missed detail, and this opportunity could evaporate. As Amara turned to leave, Vivian added, "And Ms. Lewis, not everyone will be pleased you're succeeding." The words stopped Amara cold. "Excuse me." Vivian's gaze was cold and steady. "There are people here who view your presence as a threat. They will smile to your face and undermine you behind closed doors. Be prepared." Amara's stomach twisted, but she lifted her chin. "I'm not here to make friends." Vivian's mouth curved slightly at the edge, almost approval. "Good, because you won't." The warning hung between them as Amara exited the office. That evening, Amara stayed late again, fine-tuning the logistics spreadsheet until her head throbbed. When she finally logged off, the office was dark and empty. She gathered her things and headed toward the elevators. As she waited, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see a woman from accounting, a blonde named Clarissa, who Amara had seen whispering with others earlier in the day. "Rough first week," Clarissa said lightly, smiling too brightly. Something in her tone set Amara's teeth on edge. "Nothing I can't handle," Amara replied coolly. Clarissa leaned against the wall, studying her. "Word of advice? Don't get too comfortable. People like Vivian Sterling don't have favorites. They have projects. And when the project is over..." She trailed off, giving a little shrug. I appreciate the warning, Amara said calmly, but I don't intend to be anyone's project. I intend to earn my place. Clarissa's smile tightened. We'll see. The elevator dinged, and Amara stepped inside, refusing to look back. But Clarissa's words lingered, needling at her resolve. The next day brought the first real blow. Mid-morning, as Amara was finalizing the catering proposals, an urgent email flashed across her screen. Subject: Venue double booked. Immediate attention required. She opened it, heart pounding. The gala venue, the one she had secured tentative agreements for, had been booked by another event. A high-priority corporate client. Sterling Foundation's reservation had been lost in the shuffle. No explanation. No apology, just a blunt notice. Find another location. Amara's stomach dropped. The gala was in less than 6 weeks. Securing a comparable venue on short notice would be nearly impossible. And without a venue, there would be no gala. No gala meant professional disaster. Failure. Her mind raced. Could this be a coincidence? Or sabotage? She picked up the phone and called the venue contact, her voice steady despite the fury boiling beneath. I'm sorry, Ms. Lewis, the woman on the line said, clearly flustered. Your reservation wasn't finalized in the system. Someone from your team canceled it. Canceled it? Amara's heart stopped. Who? There was a long pause. It came from someone named Clarissa. Said she was authorized. Amara closed her eyes for a brief, searing second. Clarissa, of course. She ended the call and sat back, her hands trembling with rage. Clarissa had tried to set her up to fail, and if Amara went to Vivian now, it would look like she was making excuses. Blaming others, weak, no. She would not play the victim. She would solve this. She spent the next 2 hours calling every venue in a 50-mile radius. Rejections piled up. Booked. 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 Finally, a slim thread of hope. A community cultural center downtown had a newly renovated event space available, but it needed confirmation within the next 24 hours. Amara booked it immediately, securing the contract and emailing the signed agreement to Vivian. A simple message followed. Updated venue secured. No disruption to event schedule. Vivian's response came minutes later. Good, nothing more, no questions. No praise. But Amara didn't need it. She had survived the ambush. That night, she arrived home to find Nia and Noelle building a pillow fort in the living room. Mommy, can we camp inside tonight? Nia asked, her dark curls bouncing as she grinned. Amara knelt, gathering both girls into her arms. Of course we can, she whispered. She lay there later, squeezed between them on the living room floor, staring up at the sagging ceiling. Today could have broken her. Instead, it had built her stronger. She wasn't here to be anyone's charity case. She wasn't here to survive. She was here to win. And nothing, not sabotage, not doubt, not fear, was going to stop her. Not now, not ever. The days that followed felt like a pressure cooker for Amara. The gala planning moved into its critical stages, and every task seemed designed to test her endurance. Finalizing the guest list, confirming the menu, coordinating AV equipment and volunteer schedules. Every department had opinions. Every email carried urgency. Every misstep would be magnified under Sterling Foundation's unforgiving spotlight. And hovering behind it all was Clarissa. The sabotage hadn't stopped. Small things now. Incorrect messages delivered, meeting invites mysteriously lost, expense approvals delayed. None of it was overt enough to prove malicious intent, but together they formed a pattern. Someone wanted Amara to fail, yet she refused to give them the satisfaction. She stayed late, double-checked every detail, kept meticulous records, and she kept her head down, giving Clarissa no ammunition. Still, the stress took its toll. Sleep was a luxury. Her temper, normally slow to rise, flared at the smallest provocation. She snapped at Nia for spilling juice. She cried in the shower after Noelle asked innocently why Mommy looked so tired all the time. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table piecing together table assignments with trembling hands, Nia climbed onto her lap. "Mommy, are you sad?" Amara forced a smile. "No, baby, just busy." Nia pressed her little hand to Amara's cheek, serious beyond her 6 years. "You don't have to do it all by yourself, you know." Amara's throat tightened painfully. She hugged her daughter close, blinking hard against the sting of tears. If only life were that simple. The next morning, she arrived at the office to find an email waiting from Vivian. "Meeting, conference room B, 9 a.m. The subject line was as blunt as a hammer. When Amara entered, she found Vivian already there, standing at the window overlooking the city. Next to her sat a man Amara had never seen before. Mid-40s, expensive suit, expression like carved granite. "Sit," Vivian said, without turning around. Amara obeyed, setting her bag carefully on the floor. "This is David Renshaw, head of internal compliance," Vivian said. "He's been reviewing some concerns brought to our attention." Amara's heart rate spiked. Concerns. About what? Renshaw opened a folder and slid a sheet of paper across the table. According to several anonymous sources, there are allegations of procedural misconduct regarding the gala planning. Budget irregularities, preferential vendor treatment, failure to follow protocol. The words swam in front of Amara's eyes. "That's not true," she said automatically, but her voice sounded distant, disconnected. Vivian finally turned, her face expressionless. "We take all allegations seriously. You'll be temporarily relieved of your event duties pending investigation." Amara stared at her, disbelief crashing over her. "I've done nothing wrong." Renshaw shrugged, unbothered. "If that's the case, you have nothing to worry about." Amara's hands balled into fists on her lap. "Who made these allegations?" Renshaw gave a thin smile. "Anonymous, of course. Standard procedure to protect whistleblowers. Of course." Anonymous. Convenient. She looked at Vivian, willing her to see, really see, the injustice unfolding. Vivian's gaze remained unreadable. "We will conduct a thorough review. In the meantime, you are to hand over all event-related files and step back from active planning." The words hit like physical blows. Weeks of grueling work, stripped away in seconds. Amara stood stiffly. "May I speak freely?" Vivian nodded once. "This is a setup," Amara said, her voice steady. "Someone wants me out, because they know I'm capable, because they know I'm a threat. I have documented every step of my work. I will cooperate fully, but make no mistake, I will clear my name." Vivian held her gaze for a long, tense beat. "Then see that you do," she said quietly. The meeting ended, but the war had only begun. Amara spent the rest of the day compiling everything: emails, invoices, contracts, meticulously organizing proof of her integrity. The hours blurred. She barely noticed when night fell outside the windows. At one point, Clarissa sauntered past her cubicle, lips curled in a smug little smile. Amara didn't react. She didn't need to. Truth didn't need theatrics. Late that night, as she walked to the bus stop under flickering streetlights, her phone buzzed. A blocked number. She hesitated, then answered. "Ms. Lewis," a gravelly voice said. "You don't know me, but I work maintenance at the Westbrook Community Center. I overheard something you might want to know. About your gala venue and a certain accounting department employee. Amara's blood turned to ice. Tell me everything, she whispered. What the maintenance worker described confirmed her worst suspicions. Clarissa had orchestrated the sabotage from the beginning, manipulating internal systems and falsifying communications to make it seem like Amara had mishandled her duties. And now, thanks to this brave stranger, Amara had proof. The next morning, Amara walked into Vivian's office carrying a thick binder. Vivian looked up, surprised by her presence. I have something you need to see, Amara said, her voice calm and sure. She laid the binder on the desk and opened it, page after page of evidence neatly arranged. Emails, call logs, witness statements. Vivian flipped through it silently. As she reached the final page, a flicker of something crossed her face. Satisfaction. Vindication? Amara couldn't tell. Vivian closed the binder slowly. Leave this with me. Amara met her gaze squarely. I don't want special treatment. I just want the truth to come out. Vivian's lips thinned into something resembling a smile. Good. Because it will. As Amara left the office, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not blind hope, earned hope. She wasn't naive. She knew the road ahead would still be rough. She would still have to fight. But she also knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not alone anymore, and she would not go down without a battle. Not for herself. Not for her daughters. Not for anything. The tension inside Sterling Foundation the next morning was thick enough to choke on. Whispers swirled through the halls like smoke, employees huddling in doorways and peeking over cubicle walls. Amara felt the weight of every glance, every murmured word. But she kept her head high as she walked into the building, the heels of her simple black pumps clicking sharply against the marble floors. Today was the day everything would break wide open. At 9:00 a.m., Vivian called an emergency all-staff meeting in the main conference hall. No one knew exactly why, but speculation buzzed like static electricity. Clarissa was conspicuously absent from her usual spot by the elevators, and Amara saw more than a few curious eyes dart toward her as she filed into the room. Vivian stood at the front of the hall, perfectly composed in a navy suit, her hands resting lightly on the podium. Thank you for assembling so quickly, she began, her voice cool and commanding. I want to address a matter that has recently come to my attention, one that speaks directly to the integrity of this organization. The room fell into a hush. It has come to light, Vivian continued, that a deliberate attempt was made to sabotage one of our employees. False allegations were filed, evidence was tampered with, reputations were put at risk. A low ripple of shock moved through the room. Amara sat still, heart hammering against her ribs. Vivian's gaze swept the crowd, sharp as a blade. We have identified the individual responsible. Effective immediately, Clarissa Hayes is terminated from her position at Sterling Foundation for gross misconduct, breach of trust, and violation of company ethics. Gasps broke out across the room. Some exchanged looks of disbelief. Others nodded grimly, as if everything suddenly made sense. Vivian let the moment settle before continuing. Additionally, I would like to recognize the individual whose professionalism, diligence, and resilience prevented a critical event from collapsing under sabotage. She turned her eyes directly onto Amara. Amara Lewis, please stand. Amara hesitated for a fraction of a second, then rose slowly, feeling every pair of eyes in the room lock onto her. Vivian's voice carried through the silence. Against enormous pressure and under unjust scrutiny, Ms. Lewis exemplified what we value most: courage, integrity, and excellence. The Sterling Foundation owes her a debt of gratitude. The applause started hesitantly at first, then built steadily until it filled the entire hall. Genuine. Resonant. Amara stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the tide of it. She caught sight of Daniel grinning proudly from the side, and Alicia giving her a discreet thumbs up from the third row. But it was Vivian's nod, small, precise, acknowledging, that hit the hardest. When Amara finally sat down, her cheeks burned but her chest felt lighter than it had in months. Later that afternoon, Vivian summoned her once again to her office. This time, the atmosphere was markedly different. "Sit," Vivian said, gesturing toward the chair opposite her desk. Amara obeyed, smoothing her skirt with nervous fingers. Vivian studied her for a long moment. "You were impressive today." "Thank you," Amara said quietly. Vivian tapped a pen against the polished wood. "We have an opening for an assistant director of events. Higher salary, full benefits, greater responsibilities." Amara's breath caught. "You want me to apply?" Vivian's lips twitched faintly. "No, I want to offer it to you directly." Amara gripped the arms of her chair. I'm honored." Vivian nodded once. "You've proven you have the grit and the intelligence to thrive here." "We need people like you, people who don't fold under pressure." Amara struggled to find her voice. "Thank you." "I won't let you down." Vivian's expression softened just a fraction. "I know you won't." As Amara left Vivian's office, offer letter in hand, she almost couldn't believe it. Less than 2 months ago, she'd been facing eviction, praying just to survive. Now she was being invited to step into a leadership role at one of the most prestigious foundations in the city. But even as the excitement buzzed in her veins, a deeper, more powerful feeling grounded her. This wasn't luck. This wasn't charity. This was the result of every late night, every fight to be seen, every moment she had refused to break. The following Friday, Vivian hosted a small private luncheon for select team members. Amara was stunned to find herself included. The event was elegant but intimate. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, sunlight spilling across the room through massive windows. Near the end of the meal, as the waiters cleared away dessert plates, Vivian rose and tapped her glass lightly with a fork. "I just want to say one more thing before we all return to chaos," she said, her voice carrying easily across the room. "Leadership isn't about titles. It isn't about control. It's about service. About resilience. About fighting for what's right, even when it's hard." She glanced meaningfully toward Amara. "And sometimes, the strongest leaders are forged not in privilege, but in fire." Amara felt a lump rise in her throat. As the luncheon broke up, several employees approached her to shake her hand, congratulate her, or offer small words of encouragement. Even some of those who had once watched her with suspicion now seemed eager to connect. When she finally made it outside into the bright afternoon sun, Amara let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Nia and Noelle were waiting at home, their arms ready for hugs, their excited voices eager to hear about Mommy's important day. But more than that, Amara knew she was walking toward a future she had built with her own hands, her own courage, her own heart. No one had given this to her. She had taken it. And she would never, ever forget that. Not for a single second. Saturday morning dawned bright and warm, the kind of rare, perfect spring day when the whole city seemed to hum with life. Amara stood in the small kitchen of their new apartment, flipping pancakes while the twins giggled at the kitchen table, arguing over which syrup was the right syrup to use. "Mommy," Noelle declared with wide, earnest eyes, "today feels special." Amara smiled to herself as she flipped another pancake onto the growing stack. "It is special," she said. "It's the start of something new." The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. After accepting the assistant director position, Amara had thrown herself into her new responsibilities with a drive that surprised even her. There were challenges, of course, new expectations, new politics, new pressures. But there was also something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. She had earned this. No handouts, no shortcuts. Just grit, resilience, and heart. That afternoon, as they walked through their neighborhood park, a small green oasis nestled between high-rises, Amara found herself pausing near the playground. Nia and Noelle raced ahead toward the swings, their laughter carried on the breeze. As she watched them, a familiar voice spoke beside her. "They look happy." Amara turned to see Vivian, casually dressed in jeans and a blazer, holding a takeaway coffee. For once, she wasn't the imposing figure behind the glass desk, but simply another person, watching life unfold. "They are," Amara said, her tone lighter than it had been in months. Vivian offered her a rare, genuine smile. "You should be too," Amara shrugged modestly. "I'm getting there." Vivian nodded, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. "I wanted to tell you something," she said after a moment. "Something I probably should have said earlier." Amara raised an eyebrow, curious. "You reminded all of us of something important. That integrity isn't just a word we throw around. It's a responsibility. And that sometimes the system needs a little shaking up to remember that." Amara blinked, surprised by the candor. "Thank you," she said quietly. Vivian's gaze turned back to the playground, where Naya had just managed to pump herself high into the air, squealing with delight. "Keep pushing, Amara. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She nodded once more, then disappeared into the crowd, leaving Amara standing there, heart full and trembling. Later that evening, after the girls were asleep, Amara sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, staring out over the city lights. Everything felt different now, not easier. Not perfect, but possible. The struggles she had faced were not erased, but they no longer defined her. She thought back to the beginning, to the morning she'd received the eviction notice, to the nights she'd wept silently, to the days she wondered if hope was something reserved for other people. She thought about Clarissa, about Vivian, about the nameless maintenance worker who had risked his job to tell her the truth, about the tiny steps, the brave choices, the quiet victories, and about how, sometimes, the most extraordinary stories didn't start with triumphs. They started with pain, with injustice, with being underestimated. Amara smiled softly, setting her tea down. This was just the beginning. She would teach her daughters that bravery wasn't loud. It didn't always wear armor or wield swords. Sometimes bravery was getting up when you were exhausted. Speaking truth when it was dangerous. Believing in your worth even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. Sometimes bravery was just staying and fighting and daring to hope again. She reached for her phone and opened a new note. At the top, she typed, "New Dreams," and beneath it, in steady hands, she wrote, "Finish MBA. Buy our own house. Start a mentoring program for single mothers. Teach Nia and Noelle that strength looks like love." As she saved the note, she looked up at the stars beginning to flicker into existence overhead. Somewhere, somehow, Connor was smiling at her. And somewhere inside her, a new fire had been lit, not the desperate flicker of survival, but the steady, roaring blaze of a woman who knew exactly who she was. She rose from the balcony chair, one last thought lingering as she went inside. Sometimes the world tried to bury you. And sometimes you bloomed anyway. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that resilience is stronger than injustice, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Here, we believe in the power of ordinary heroes and everyday miracles. Stay kind, stay brave, and never stop fighting for your dreams.